Exactly.
They
Uh,
were taking the part and they were backing the part of the British. Now, they could have had their own motives for that.
mhm.
They might say privately, they wouldn't say it to the public, but they might have said privately, we can't afford to take on the North. We can't afford to tell the truth in case we're forced to take on the North. Or they might have just had the point of view, a cynical point of view. This is a mess by the British. Leave the British sort it out themselves.
Exactly. Uh,
But it's the Irish people, particularly the Irish people in the North, unionist as much as nationalist, were suffering because of this. Because this endless conflict that no one wants to stand up and say, hey, we need to sort this out. We need
exactly.
to finish this.
Exactly.
And when you, in the end of the day, it was John Hume and Jerry Adams who took the bull by the horns themselves and did that. And it was only the Irish government that then came kicking and screaming had fallen behind. And the
Well,
Americans, and without the Americans, we wouldn't have done it
absolutely.
because the British wouldn't have gave the concessions. There'd be no Good Friday Agreement without the Americans.
Without the
And we
Americans,
have to
that's true.
accept that.
That's
No
true.
matter what else we think about the Americans, we have to give them credit for
That's
that bit.
true. That's true. They've been always a good support in case
Yeah.
of the pieces. But what is like amazing about the story, and like you have so really great memory of like all these vivid stuff that happened in past. Would you mind to tell us now that like you're really passionate about this? And would you remember Monaghan bombing? Because this
Yeah.
country's biggest
Yeah.
disastrous bombing and
Yeah.
killing happened in the hand of UVF, right?
Yeah.
And so many years public been told that IRA did this, right?
Yeah.
And still the families that they are being suffered because they didn't get the like the an answer from the government for that.
That's the big like you saw what happened last year
Of course.
with the Stardust.
Yes,
What
Stardust. Yeah.
those people had to go through to get
Oh
justice.
my God, yeah.
But this happened years before that.
Years
And those
before.
families haven't got justice yet.
Still nothing.
Because to get justice, they have to admit that it was the British, not the loyalists, that
Exactly.
actually masterminded that. The
Exactly.
loyalists were the surrogates. If this went wrong, they're going to be blamed,
Mm.
but the British are the ones controlling them. Okay? Now, the Irish government can't have that getting out,
Mhm.
because if they do, then they themselves are going to be accused of collaborating with the British.
That's true. Yeah,
Okay?
exactly.
What happened to the evidence after those bombings?
They disappeared, as far as I know, yeah?
MI5, MI6.
Yeah.
The British got them.
The British
Who
one,
gave
yeah.
it to them?
Exactly.
Here's another question. In 1977, when Fianna Fáil had a landslide victory,
Mhm.
one of the first things they did when they came to power, they sacked the Garda Commissioner, Ned Garvey. He was a Fine Gael Garda Commissioner.
Fine
They
Gael.
sacked him. Why?
That was the guy that who was helping the UEF.
No, this is the Garda Commissioner.
Okay, Garda Commissioner.
Okay? The theory, and it's only a theory, but the theory is that he collaborated with the British. He gave them the evidence,
Yeah,
and just get rid of this problem for
yeah,
us.
I heard about that as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
so Fianna Fáil sacked them. Now they never stated publicly why, but the public were left to make up their own minds about that.
of course.
So we know that that regime from 1973 up to 1977, Fine Gael and Labour, they were up to here with collaboration with the British, and that's when all the same Garda heavy gang came into being, where
Okay,
Republicans, Nicky Kelly,
Nikki
the
Kelly.
Salons,
Mhm.
all the torture that went on there in Garda stations, that went all on under his watch.
Wow.
Ned Garvey, the Fine Gael. So Fine Gael, when they shout about law and order, think of torture. Think of people, innocent people beaten to pulp in Garda barracks. And that's went on under their watch. That's what Fine Gael law and order represents.
Unbelievable story. One of the things that Kieran and I realized, we did the beautiful tour with you, right, in
Yeah,
Cobh. And what it amazed me, I always thought that I know about Irish history, about IRA, early IRA, and about the Cobh as well. But you made me realize that I don't know anything. But the beauty part of the history that I like, each places that we walk, there was a history there, which sometimes we walk, but we don't realize those kind of stuff.
yeah.
And would you tell us when did you decided to do this tour and couple of history, and especially I would like to hear as well because they were like those beautiful pictures which I will share for people, but their families, whomever they still have businesses there, their
Yeah.
grandfathers, they were
Yeah.
fighting in back in
Oh,
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can hardly go through a street in Cork. And I'm talking about the old town now.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about the suburbs, which is COVID's just sprouted out. I'm talking about the old part of the town. You can't go through any street without something
happened
happened
there. Yeah,
or some person that lived there. And people just walk, the people of Cobh just walk the streets every day, oblivious to all this. One of the things I say to all my guests on tour, and most of them are Americans, they could be Canadians, they could be British, they could be Australians, Europeans, the whole lot. I always say to them when they're finished the tour, you now know more about this town than the people living in it.
living there.
And that's a fact.
That is the fact.
And I,
That's
and
it.
I know I do that myself. When I go abroad on holidays, I love to find out as much as I can about the streets, what went down in those places.
Exactly.
And I don't have the same interest when I come back here. But this history, the Cobh history, well, you didn't see it. You only saw a
Yeah,
sample of what
exactly,
I do and
exactly.
what I could do. And my tour takes 2 hours and it covers 16 sites. I could actually take people to 100 sites in Cobh.
Wow.
But you're right what you said. There's a lot of families in Cobh today that had loved ones who were involved in that conflict.
Wow.
Uh,
Like, for example, do you know, because I remember from our tour as well, they were like a couple of interesting stories, especially that young Fenians when they were walking on the street that we were standing,
yeah,
which was shocking for me because then I started to imagine that time and that moment of the event. And then when the public was throwing the stones and they were throwing or
yeah,
like shouting at the young Irish men who were trying to fight.
yeah.
How Cobh? And first of all, why the name of Cobh? Why the name of Queenstown? As a historian, would you tell the public?
Okay, so the name Cobh, now people need to be aware of this. Cobh is probably one of the few towns in Ireland which the British could genuinely, with hand on heart, say, we built that one.
Yeah,
Most other Irish towns, the British came in, the Norman
late.
invasion, they took over the towns and they might have just tweaked the name to suit their own lingo. But Cobh, when the British arrived here, there would have only been a few fishing families living on the shoreline. And they saw the whole strategic layout of the whole harbour. Cobh was just a part of that strategy for the whole naval and security process. So they put different forts. They had one in Spike. They had the outer harbour, but they also had a fort in Cobh down the batteries down the eastern side where the pilot boats are. And so they built the town, but it was built, as you can see. A lot of the streets have similar structures, similar layout design from what you would have had in Victorian England.
Right.
You had the big houses up in the hills overlooking the harbour, the grand sites. You had the dwellings down the eastern side, the holy ground, where the tenements, all the poor, the workers, the peasants uh, lived. And then in 1849, right in the height of the famine, someone got a brainwave. Someone in one of those big affluent houses on the lower road or the high road, the unionist houses, someone got a brainwave. We should invite the Queen Victoria over, the
No.
Queen. And they did, and she arrived. She took up the offer. Would you believe it? For some unknown reason, she decided to visit Ireland during the famine, and Cobh was the place.
Wow.
So then those unionists, who made up less than 10% of the town population,
Which they were like managing
yeah,
entire.
and you must remember in 1849, we had no local town council, elected council at that time. So that minority took it upon themselves to speak for everyone.
Yeah. Those were the same guys that who were like when the James Connolly came here, they were
Yeah,
attacking and the poor
yeah,
guy was
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
took the
Now,
refuge.
yeah, but that wouldn't be entirely correct because one of the people who organized the riot against James Connolly in 1911, and remember now, Connolly was not here at that point to talking about Brits out. Connolly was here at that time to try and get the council members, to back a scheme where they would subsidize free meals for the poor, the school children in the schools,
Oh,
all over
yeah.
Ireland. Yeah. Now, he asked the British government to do that, but they wouldn't because he knew that such a scheme already existed in England for the poor over there. He felt, well, the poverty in Ireland is way stronger. So what he did is he embarked on a tour all over Ireland, every town, every city, that had an elected council, he was going to lobby them to try and get councillors to support his policy.
Wow.
He was in Cobh on the 7th of March 1911. He was speaking where Casement Square is now. That time it was called Scott Square.
Scott Square.
And there was no monument, so the square was big. He was on his soapbox, addressing the council, or addressing the crowd, which there was a number of councillors present. Most of them were nationalists. And the chairman at the time was nationalist. His name was Richard Hennessy. But he knew what Connolly was up to. And he had people planted in the crowd. People who would belong to the ancient order of Hibernians. They were kind of... today you might regard them as right-wing Christians. That's what they would be called today. So they were planted in the crowd and they were heckling Connolly and they were booing him and jeering him. And it got to the point where he realised, I'm not going to get anywhere here with this crowd. But he decided before he left, he was going to have a pop of the chairman because he knew he was the instigator of all this. So he shouted over at Hennessy and he said, look at you, sir, with your big top hat on. You look like a codfish standing on its tail. And with that, the mob erupted. Hennessy supporters, they attacked Connolly and his supporters. And they chased him through the archway into the next square, which was King Square at the time. And they chased him down into the Rob Roy Hotel, which is the Rob Roy bar today.
At the moment, yeah.
They barricaded themselves in because they knew they were going to be killed. And they waited then for the mob to die down. They waited for about an hour and a half. The police then came along and gave Connolly an escort out of town.
Jesus, what a story, no?
But it doesn't finish there. Connolly arrived back 3 days later, and he did it quietly. He booked a room in the town hall from the town clerk. He paid. He went back in and he addressed the councillors, not the chairman, the other councillors, the good ones. He addressed them and he made the speech that he wanted to make a few days earlier. And one of those councillors, a councillor called Bransfield, and when in the days that followed, when the chairman, Hennessy, he reprimanded the town clerk for giving out the hall to Connolly, and he reprimanded the other councillors for attending Connolly's meeting.
Wow.
But Bransfield spoke up and he said, no, you're not going to bully me. I believed everything. I agree entirely with everything that James Connolly was speaking about, the poor in this town. And it's the likes of you and other business people who were depriving them of this. And that was reported in the Irish Examiner, actually.
Irish Examiner.
Yeah, it was someone knew, I think it was the Cork Constitution. They reported at 2 events. But Connolly later, when he was writing about Cobh, or Queenstown as it was then, he called it, and you can't disagree with him because he was right what he said. He said that place is a nest of parasites living off parasites. Now, I at the time thought he was just being angry. But when later years, when I learned the history of Cobh, I realised what he really meant. Because we know stories, for example, of poor immigrants. They come to Cobh to take the boat to America, hoping to have a better life during the famine and afterwards. So, for example, there was plenty of stories told about this. One of the most prominent one I remember stuck out for me was one of those people would, the night before the ship was due to depart, they'd book into a bed and breakfast. They paid the landlady the fee. They go to bed, they have their meal, they go to bed. And next morning, rap, rap, rap on the door. The landlady, hurry, 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 you slept in, you're going to miss your ship, you're going to miss your boat. So the natural thing they would do is they get dressed, grab their belongings, run to the ship.
Right.
Only to discover that they're not late. But they've lost the breakfast that they paid for the night before.
All right.
So it was all these sort of stories. And that's what Connolly was referring to. And Connolly would have known that because when he came to Ireland first, he came as a British soldier himself. He was from Edinburgh in Scotland. He joined the army like everyone else did just to get a meal and get a wage.
Of course.
So he came here and he served on Rocky Island, which is the crematorium today in Halbolan. He served as a sentry. They were guarding the gunpowder magazines over there at the time.
Right.
So he would have been very familiar with all stuff that was going on in Cobh, by the business people exploiting the poor that were coming through the town, immigrating to America.
My God, like that's an unbelievable story because like I knew the part of that one, but the details.
And the good news is the family had the last say in all this, because in 2011, 100 years to the day that incident happened when he was attacked, I was a councillor then, and I proposed on that centenary that Connolly and his family would be given a posthumous apology for the treatment he received from the then town chairman, Mr. Hennessy.
Excellent.
And his great-grandson came down from Dublin on that event to unveil that plaque. That plaque is outside the Rob Roy Bar today.
Well, yeah, actually, I was reading that. This beautiful part of the story. You were mentioning Hennessy, then obviously, I would like to ask you, who are the native in Cobh, like families that they still exist till this time?
Oh, there's plenty of them.
Yeah.
Plenty of them, but no, like who were you referring to? Because some of those families, and they were decent people, good people, would have been in the British forces.
Of course.
Because you must remember that back then, before independence, a lot of people take this for granted. A lot of people in free Ireland today, or the southern part of Ireland is free. A lot of people just take all this for granted. They don't realise that a war had to be fought before they got that freedom.
Exactly.
So
it didn't come for free, you know.
They didn't come for free. People had to go out, they had to kill and be killed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not getting it.
You wouldn't get this one.
So we just imagine what it'd be like. We'd be in the middle of Brexit now. We'd be suffering the way the people in England are suffering today, the poor, and some of them don't have the food in the shops over there. Things are gone so bad. But we are independent now. We didn't get that by being nice. You have to fight a war.
Of course.
Just like the British Empire didn't become the big empire it is by being nice to people.
Yeah.
They had to go out and take other people's lands, including us.
Right.
Their nearest neighbour, first and last colony.
Is the first and last colony, yeah.
Yeah. So it was quite natural for people in this town to be in the British Navy.
Right.
Because that harbour is full of a big British fleet, all the conflict going on and all that. You're part of that. Now, that doesn't mean, just because you're in the British uniform, that doesn't mean that your allegiance is with Britain. Because most of these guys, even though they have a British uniform, they're still Irish nationalists.
Absolutely.
They believe, doesn't mean they're going to fight about it, but they believe that Ireland should be free and independent.
Exactly.
That's their desire. It's in everyone's heart. Exactly. It's just to what extent it's in your heart is the difference. And so that's what you're doing.
Of course.
And when this all happened then in 1913, there was a company of Irish volunteers formed in Cobh. They were formed in the ancient order of Hibernian Hall, which is today is Stella Marie is the house. It's on Rose Hill.
Right.
That's the building that they were formed in. And they became volunteers. Now, some of them, they were only teenagers. They were apprentices over in the Naval Dockyard with the British Navy.
Right.
But they took that up. Some of them, the vast majority of those, stayed with Owen MacNeil when the split happened, when John Redmond came along and took over the volunteers in this town, like he did all over the country. They all then went with, most of them, 99% went with the British. There's only a handful stay behind. It's those handful. They were the backbone to the struggle that was coming after that.
Wow, they always stayed loyal.
So the families you mentioned, the families you referred to, you have the Leahys. You have the Fitzgeralds. You would have had the Aherns. You would have had well, I know there's others. You had the Moores. You would have the O'Sullivans. I could go on and on. And then you had others. This is interesting. You had others who were serving with the British in the war, like Jack Damery.
Okay.
Great man. He came back, but another man from Cobh. Both of them came back, and they started training the volunteers. A man named Graham from Carrigallaw. There was other people who then had nothing to do with the volunteers, either the national volunteers or the Irish volunteers, because they're two distinct different groups. One is fighting with the British, one is fighting for Ireland. You had other guys from this town who was nothing to do with either of them, who also volunteered with the British. Though they would have been guys who would have just wanted to join the British Army for adventure, to get involved in this war for adventure. Like you had guys today who are out in Ukraine. They're out there for adventure.
Of course.
Now they want to help the Ukrainians, but the main reason is adventure.
Adventure, that's true.
And so that's what you had. And you have all this in the mix going on in this community, like every other community. So you have all those families, and there's still some of them there today.
Amazing. One interesting question that I want to ask you, Kieran. You lived here for most of your life as well, right? And when you look at the back of the time, how was the COP then and now? And were there any foreigner, when I talk about foreigner outside of Ireland and England as well, any like from Europe that they were living here as well?
No, I don't remember any. This is only in my memory. Um, People outside of Ireland would have been the first. Would have been the Poles.
Poles.
Yeah,
After
yeah, yeah.
they
And
were,
I remember. I remember at the time thinking, "This is brilliant. It's great."
exactly,
People see, them see our country and let us learn from what we can learn from them.
of
I
course,
remember thinking that. Um, where we are now, the far right.
exactly.
Where the hell has that come from? Now, I tell you my opinion, where I think it came from.
Yeah,
The far right today, they're probably what, maybe 1 or 2% of
mhm.
what public opinion thinks, but they're very vocal because of
They're
they've
very
got
vocal,
stuff that
yes,
we didn't have when we wanted to get our story out about
exactly.
what's going on in our country, internet. They
They
have that.
they don't have the
They
Section
abuse it.
31,
They don't have to back up a statement with facts.
Right,
They just put something out there and they'll make it up. But they wouldn't have a voice today
right,
if it wasn't for housing.
exactly,
If there was no housing crisis in this country, people wouldn't even be talking about immigrants. It wouldn't feature. It didn't feature in the noughties, in the early noughties, because there wasn't a housing problem.
there
It
was,
was only as soon as the housing problem developed.
yeah,
It developed because of the bust, and the bust became because of Fianna Fáil, and also because of Fine Gael afterwards and Labour when they introduced all the austerity. That's when people started getting angry, and then it got to the stage where they couldn't afford to build houses.
which they
And then
brought up with this,
when they got to the stage where they had the money to build the houses,
right,
they then gave it over to the private vultures, to the
exactly,
private companies. They didn't do what they did in the 1930s and the 1940s. Build social houses first.
yeah,
Get the families housed. Get the lists down. And then you can start spending on
exactly,
private if that's what people want.
exactly.
You take that problem away. If there was a house for every family that needed one today,
There
there
wouldn't
would be
be
no one talking about immigrants.
exactly,
People would be
exactly
welcomed with open arms the way we were welcomed when we went abroad.
in America, and
Yeah.
plus you have like kids as well who lives in abroad as well,
Yeah.
right?
And I remember having a discussion when I was working in Belgium with a Belgian guy one day, because the Belgians have perfect English. Anyone under the age of 30 that time had perfect English. So we were discussing everything. And he said to me, there's a protest in the middle of Antwerp on this Friday
Mhm.
night. And I said, what's the protest about? Oh, he said, we're getting the immigrants out. I said, what? I said, who's going to build all the stuff we're building here if there's no immigrants?
Right.
Ah, you're not an immigrant. You're okay. You're white. I'm talking about the Moroccans, he said. No,
Yeah.
the Moroccans were coming in with contractors. No, they were paid less. Now they were insignificant
Mhm.
in Belgium at that time. But as you know,
Now
all
it's
of
like
Europe now they're all gone. Yeah. But he said to me, "These guys, I said, what's wrong with them?" I said, "They're doing the work. They're brilliant, and they were great workers. They were working a lot faster than we were." And yeah, yeah, no, but we don't want them. But I said, "Sir," I said, what about us? All the Irish guys. What about the English guys? What about the Scots guys? They're all good. I bet they're all white.
They're all white, yeah.
Yeah,
This is the perception. The
yeah,
same thing that happened in Ukraine. I remember the BBC reporter was saying that, oh, here's a tragedy. Those people, like, they have blue eyes, they're blonde,
yeah.
like, for that when they bring the skin, then obviously it's like becoming disgusting. And can I ask you, Kieran, actually, before we wrap up, and your because I know that you're a spiritual man, right? Where
Yeah.
that comes from, and when you say spiritual, what do you mean?
Spiritual in the sense that I'm a medium. I can speak with spirit,
Yeah,
people who are deceased. I help people who want to communicate with a loved one, and I can bring that person. Well, I don't decide who comes through,
yeah.
but normally, if a person is missing a loved one, the
It
spirit is
can
aware of that, and they're the person who will come through, and I'll communicate a message for them.
perfect. So you believe in spirits, right?
Without a doubt, always did, always did.
And so a man, and obviously, like also in the religious ways, And when we die, and usually, what do you think that it happens? There is reincarnation.
Yeah,
Reincarnation,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I won't, I know a lot, I've experienced a lot. I won't go into it because I know it'd be too heavy for people to understand, but I know I had previous lives. I know it now. I went through all my youth, teenage, early adulthood, confused about all things that I knew I was different in some ways, experiences I had. I now understand everything. I know, for example, that when we come here, when we're born, before we're born,
There is
everything was preordained.
wow.
It's all already written before. Me and you having this conversation, that was already
If it
part of
wasn't right then.
my soul contract.
The being spiritual, it helps in
Well, perspective, everything
yeah.
in perspective.
Your life changed obviously as soon as you became the spiritual man, yeah?
Yeah.
Amazing. That's the good to hear, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
you find the peace, I would
Yeah.
say.
My sister, Mary, departed us 3 or 4 months ago.
Sorry
Now,
to hear that.
I had the benefit of being spiritual before that happened. I knew it made it a lot easier for me. It made it a lot easier for Mary because we discussed all this. And Mary has come to me a number of times since.
Oh, amazing.
So
Amazing.
I didn't need that confirmation, but it was lovely to get it anyway,
Wow.
because I understood it.
Of
And
course.
I know that I would be in a very, it's not that I don't mourn her, I miss her every day and I still cry about her. It would have been a lot harder
Right.
had I not that knowledge. I know she's in a brilliant place. I know she's probably here now looking down and laughing at us.
Wow.
And my mother has only passed away 2 months. I discussed this with my mother before she passed, and my mother believed as well.
And
And
made it easier for her to this is
yeah.
great to hear that. Kieran, and before we say
Don't forget yourself.
yeah,
We
of
need to come
course.
to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before anyone that lives in Cobh, I always say, I also told to my wife and then kids as well, they have to do this tour. Because again, when I did it, it was like, wow. Because when you listen the stories, and we were like 5, 6 people doing the tour, everybody's mouth was open. We were just imagining those stories that Kieran was telling us. So I suggest anyone, as a gift to your family, gift to your kids, do this tour. This is very important.
They can get a voucher for Christmas for
Exactly.
someone.
And there is a beautiful picture that I see now here, bringing closer. And who are those, Kieran?
Okay. They're the East Cork Flying Column.
Yeah.
And everyone in this photograph would have been dead 7 months after it was taken.
Wow.
They were all killed in an ambush in Clonmalt, and we had there was 14 altogether. We had
They were from this area, no?
yeah, East Cork, the 4th Battalion Flying Column. Now, 2 of them were killed. James Ahern, okay? James Ahern was a local town councillor, and he was killed in that ambush. 2 others, Morris Moore and Paddy O'Sullivan, were arrested after it, and they were then executed in Victoria Barracks, which would be Collins's barracks today.
Wow.
Yeah. And like they would have been the backbone of the struggle in this town. One of them, James Ahern.
Which one would be the James?
No, he's not. I don't think he's the picture is bigger. But this guy here, look,
with the white one, yeah?
yeah, Glavin. James Glavin, this guy.
Yeah.
There's a street called after him today, Glavin Terrace.
Glavin Terrace is
from
it's
him. Called after him.
Okay.
He was involved in that other ambush I was telling you on top of the hill.
Right.
He was a scout. He was a Fianna scout at the time. But most people in Cobh today are not aware of this because they've never read about it or they didn't think it was important enough.
Necessary, yeah.
But you go about your business in Cobh every day, you're passing these street names and you don't realise they're called after individuals.
Wow.
And we've another street in the eastern part of town called Michael Burke Terrace, up by Bayview. Michael Burke was the local commander of the IRA in this town.
That's right.
He was working under the nose of the British. He was a very successful commander. We have Philip O'Neill Place.
Even Casement Square.
Yeah. Philip O'Neill was a guy. He was ex-British Navy, and he was thrown out of the Navy because of his Republican beliefs. He
Okay.
was an Irishman that was born in England, but his allegiance was Ireland. The whole town was full of street names, and people go about their business every day, not even realizing where all those names came from.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's do the tour and you'll learn a lot.
Exactly. There are so many things actually to learn about this. Kieran, before we wrap up,
I want to make a statement here now with regards to this man. Okay. I only learned about him a few weeks ago that he was running as for Sinn Féin. And the minute I heard it, I said, I want to help this man because I heard that he didn't get a lot of help during his local election campaign earlier, even though he got a nice, healthy vote. We know he's a very strong chance of being elected this time. Cobh has an opportunity now that they didn't have since 1992 when John Mulville was elected to have a local TD. There's two candidates running from Cobh today, not three, two. Mehdi, he lives in the
cool.
Cooline, and you have the girl Halloran for the Green Party. They're two local candidates. Unfortunately, if you consider all the facts, Sinn Féin are the only party that are capable of taking that seat and knocking out the government parties because the Green Party are not going to be in the equation, and I think everyone kind of accepts that anyway. But Sinn Féin do have a very strong chance, and I got a feeling even this morning's poll figures, Sinn Féin are up again, and they're going to surprise everyone at the end of this election. This time, Sinn Féin are ready. They got 71 candidates. So the whole game is up for grabs. And I'm appealing you, come out and sort this man out, support him. He's involved in his community in a way bigger way than I even imagined. So as anyone that voted for